Through my work as a sobriety coach, I work with many people who have an underlying sense that in some way they're inadequate, they're just not good enough. And they carry this sense of shame throughout their lives. And I want to talk today about how shame can lead to problems when we try to stop drinking. If you can overcome any sense of being inadequate or feeling a sense of shame about yourself, then I firmly believe that you can set yourself up for success in sobriety. I'm Simon Chappell, the Quit Alcohol Coach, the author of the Sober Survival Guide and How to Quit Alcohol in 50 Days. And I run this YouTube channel for anyone who wants to change the way that alcohol features in their lives. Make sure you subscribe, hit the button and hit the bell icon and you'll get notified every time there's a new video. I do new videos every Tuesday and every Thursday. So make sure you don't miss any by hitting the subscribe button. I also run an excellent program for anyone who wants to change their relationship with alcohol. You can try it totally free. The website address is on the screen right now. Just head over to the website and you can sign up, join and get started right away. Now let's talk a little bit about how shame, and in particular toxic shame, can impact our sobriety. I think if you're aware of this, you can take steps to overcome it. And there's something specific that I want to talk about in regards to this. And you might notice I've even got my whiteboard ready so I can show you some examples of how this can play out in our lives. And it's absolutely something that happened for me. Now, very often when we're carrying toxic shame, we just have an underlying sense about ourselves. There's no specific reason, we can't quite put our finger on it, but it's there. We just have a feeling that we're in some way not good enough. And this feeling can come out of us in multiple different ways. It can show up in our lives in all sorts of different characteristics and different behaviour traits. And awareness is the first step to completely healing. And the reason that this can cause problems in sobriety is all to do with the control and the release cycle, which I'm going to share with you in just a moment. The more you can understand that and the more you can identify any issues that you have with toxic shame, the more you can step forward and address the problem. The more that you understand this, the more light you can shine on it, the more you're going to become able to overcome it and not allow it to hinder you throughout your own life. So let's talk a little bit about what toxic shame is. Toxic shame happens when we feel that there's something not good enough about ourselves and we've become unable to own that, to speak it out loud. Maybe when we were children, we were not able to express those feelings of shame in a healthy way. So instead of being able to verbalize it and own our feelings, over time we've learned to push them down inside of ourselves. And that is where it becomes toxic, because instead of feeling a sense of shame, we feel that we are shameful. And that's a big difference. We're shameful about ourselves. We're shameful about existing, about who we are. And that becomes an incredibly painful way of existing. And as I mentioned, we often can't feel exactly what's going on. We just have an underlying sense that something is wrong. And this is what leads to the control and release cycle. And this, I firmly believe, is part of the reason that we can derail ourselves when we try to stop drinking. So start to watch out. Are you internalizing your shame? Instead of just owning it, speaking it, acknowledging it, saying it out loud, we internalize it. And when we internalize it, it becomes part of us. It becomes part of our character. We truly believe we aren't good enough. Now, there's something very important for you to understand in all of this, that this is a perception. It's a perception of inadequacy. And what's really important about that phrase is that it's a perception. I've experienced this, I've been through it, and I want to share it with you because it caused me so much pain, and it also led to so many unhealthy and negative behaviours that sharing it with you will hopefully give you some insight that I wish I had had 20 years ago rather than having to live through it and eventually work it out for myself. Now, this is a perception. It doesn't even matter whether you're the most perfect person in the world. We have a perception, we have a belief that we are in some way not good enough, we're in some way inadequate. And people can tell you until they're blue in the face that you are good enough, you are perfect, you are this, you are that. It doesn't matter. And this is why we strive to achieve things. And it still doesn't lead to any positive outcome. We still have that same feeling going on beneath us. So, for example, people with this level of toxic shame, you might find that they exercise excessively to try and get the perfect body. Or maybe they work to try and make loads and loads of money. Or maybe they shop online because they believe that when they buy these particular items, everything will be fine, they'll be better. Or maybe they do creative things like art or write books, rather like me, or make videos on YouTube in the belief that one day they'll become famous. One day everything will change. This will be the gateway to the end of their feelings of inadequacy. But this isn't the problem, because it doesn't matter. You may have experienced this where you have done those things. You've maybe gone on a diet and made changes to the way you eat and the food that you're putting into your body. But actually, no matter what, even when you lose 2 stone, it doesn't make any difference, because this is a perception. It's not a reality. You probably are perfectly imperfect already, but it's a perception. It's a belief that lives within our subconscious from all the toxic shame that we've pushed down over the years. So it doesn't matter what you do in the real world, this won't change. I ran 15 or so marathons over the space of 4 years. I think it was 15, maybe 16, over the space of 4 years. I was doing exactly this. I'd got myself into a shame spiral around exercise and my body. And I truly believed that if I ran a marathon, everything would be fine. And of course, we don't see it clearly like that. It's all below the surface. It's all in our subconscious, but we're driven to do it. And when we get into that shame spiral, which is exactly what happened with me and my marathon running, we need more and more and more. So I run 1 marathon, and actually I felt good about it, but I still had a perception of inadequacy. Where is it? But I still had a perception of inadequacy, that I didn't feel good enough. So I ran another one, and another one, and another one, and on it went, the shame spiral. Because what we do in the real world does not change our perception. To get to the root of this, we need to change our perception. And this is where the control and release element of this comes in. And actually, the best thing you can do if you have feelings of shame is identify them, write them down. Very often they're things from our childhood, maybe an episode in the school classroom or the school playground, or something involving your parents. But write it down, identify exactly how it made you feel, and then own those feelings. Become mindful about it, sit with the feelings instead of trying to escape them and run away from them. Now let's talk about control and release, because that's the big point that I believe derails people when they try and stop drinking. So I see this time and time again in the people I work with as a sobriety coach, and it can come out in different ways. This isn't just specific to alcohol, but very often the release mechanism that people use is absolutely turning back to the booze. Now, what happens when we have internalized toxic shame, where we've felt shame about something, we've not processed it in a healthy way, we've pushed it down, and over time that shame has become part of who we are, so we believe it, it's a perception of inadequacy, is that we move to the control and release stage. That's the behaviour that we start to exhibit in ourselves. If you can notice this, you can bring it out into the light. You can start to own any shame. You can start to explore any shame with compassion and curiosity for yourself. And actually, Developing self-compassion is one of the best ways of dealing with shame. Knowing that nobody's perfect, but you're okay just as you are. You are good enough. I truly believe that shame lives at the heart of so many of our addictive behaviours and our negative behaviours, that if you can explore it, learn about it, you'll be taking some big steps towards healing. So when we've internalised toxic shame, we tend to move into a place of control and release. The same behaviour pattern tends to show up in almost every person who has internalised their toxic shame. So we try to control. We try to get in control of the shame. We do everything we can not to feel the feeling. That is what this is all about, is avoiding the feelings that we believe are so painfully painful that we cannot go near them. The reality is that we can look at them and we can turn and face into those feelings, but subconsciously we are trying to protect ourselves and we don't. We go the opposite direction. So the first thing we tend to do, and this can play out either way, the two are completely linked together. But generally what we try to do is we try to control. We try to control the feeling. We try to control the pain. And there are a number of ways that we can do that. And they're all behaviours that say, if I do this, I will be good enough. I will be good enough. So they are things like exercise. So we're talking about things like exercise, dieting, things that maybe change your body or in some way might change your personality or your perception of your personality. And it could even be things like cleaning the house, because then you feel that your house is perfect and therefore you're perfect. One of the most common ones is working and earning money, because of course the more money we earn, we then have a perception that we're more successful and maybe that we're better than somebody else, the next person, because we're more wealthy than them, we're more successful than them. And self-improvement is another behaviour that I see come up time and time again. People doing everything in their head, so they become quite analytical about the challenges that they're facing, and they explore it and look at it and study about it, which I think is an absolutely brilliant thing, but not necessarily if it's being driven by toxic shame, because it becomes a shame spiral. And the shame spiral is where we start doing these things for the wrong reasons. Yes, the outcome is going to be good and positive and beneficial to our lives, but if it's being driven by toxic shame, then we're never going to feel good enough. We're just going to do it and then we're going to want more of it. Now, the problem with this, trying to control toxic shame, is we're trying to control a perception, a belief, a vision, which actually isn't true. It's not the reality. So after a period of trying to control, we end up needing to release. So control always triggers a release, and actually release triggers control. The two go hand in hand, and the release can be drinking alcohol. And I would describe the release a little bit like hitting the, excuse my language, but the F it button, where we just have a feeling of, I don't care anymore. It's basically indulging the shame and not caring about it. We just go to a place where we think, screw it, I don't care, I'm just going to do it. But then this gets to a point where we start to feel that actually this is getting out of hand now and we need to get back in control. And we go from one to the other, over and over and over. And it just causes us more and more pain, more and more shame. Whereas if we can actually deal with the root of the problem, which is toxic shame that we've internalized, we can start to feel okay about ourselves. We can start to feel good enough. I don't want anyone trying to feel perfect. Perfection is a myth. Just feeling good enough is good enough. And that's what we want to be aiming for. And of course, release can come out in other ways, other unhealthy behaviours. So it can come out in things like overeating, for example. And it can even come out in our values and our beliefs. So for example, things like feeling righteous about certain things. So maybe, I don't even know if I spelt that right, but if you have a very, very strong view about something, it's normally something specific, it makes you feel that, okay, I know I'm right about that particular thing. I might not be good enough in the rest of the world, but I've got a very, very strong view about that, and I know I'm right, and I'll argue with anybody about it. In some respects, that is a type of release. So this can show up in lots and lots of different ways. But for many people, they have their default, which is alcohol, and they go back to it. When the control aspect feels too hard and it gets too much, we go back to release. But this is almost like using willpower. We know that willpower wears out just like a muscle, and eventually we have to have that release. We need to get out of this cycle of control, release, control, release. And we need to move to a place where we can simply observe any shame, own it, speak it out loud, become mindful about it, and let go of it instead of making it part of our character, part of who we are, and understand that it is just a perception. And of course, there's other releases as well. Any type of substance or drugs is going to give us that escape that we need, and that's what these are. They are all escape. And control is all about feeling good enough. But when we realise that these things aren't making us feel good enough, we have to release, we have to escape. So even things like spending money, gambling, all of these are different releases. And you might not find that all of these apply to you, but probably some of them will, and you'll be identifying with them and nodding your head, particularly around the control aspect as well. And one of the big ones is emotional addictions, and these can show up as emotional abuse. So if you don't feel good enough, you might allow your partner to make you feel that way. You might put up with emotional abuse, or it might come out in another way where you are the emotional abuser because it actually makes you feel good enough about yourself. So try to notice where this is showing up in your life. I would absolutely start by exploring what you feel shame about, then try to identify what behaviours you carry out in your life that make you cover up that shame, that make you feel better about that shame. And then look at how you're using control and release, and then keep working on that shame. Because believe me, if you're going through this process of just trying to hold control over toxic shame and not feeling good enough, eventually it's going to seep out in the need to release. And this is what derails so many people when they try and stop drinking. I hope that helps. It's just a little overview, and it's something, if you're part of my program, that we will be exploring a whole lot deeper. So if this is something you'd like to get into in more depth, absolutely join. I'd love you to join on one of the live sessions so that we can dig into this in way more depth. And I'll see you again next time.